Well, first of all, thank you very much
No,
for
my
coming
pleasure.
down today.
Thank you.
I just have one basic question, and then I'd like to open it up for the students to be able to ask questions, because ultimately you're here for them.
Okay.
When you first started in the business, do you remember your first job, and do you remember what that process was like booking that first job?
My first professional job?
Yes.
Yeah, my first professional job was the play Hair in 1969. And I had been a student at that time. I had just finished my second year at what was then the Goodman School of Drama, which is now part of DePaul University in Chicago. It's called the Theater School at DePaul University. So it was an acting school. And it was my summer off before starting my third, and it would have been my final year. It's a 3-year program. And they had auditions for this play Hair. That was all, you wouldn't know. I mean, you're all probably too young to have been around at that moment, but back in '69, the play Hair was a pretty big deal. I mean, it was like, it was like the biggest musical on Broadway. So they were holding these auditions, and they had something like 6,000 people showed up for these auditions. Kind of like It was the American Idol of its time,
Right.
And I had done musicals in high school and junior college, so I did. That was a form of acting I was familiar with. So I auditioned along with everybody else, thinking, oh, well, if nothing else, it'll be an interesting experience. What was funny is my very first audition, I went in very much as I thought one should go on an audition, and I wore a seersucker suit and a tie, and I was very kind of all ready, and I had my music from Brigadoon, which is a play I had done. So I come in to audition for the play Hair, walking in like I'm coming in to do My Fair Lady, But I thought, well, this is a play. It's a play. They'll understand this. I'm an actor. I remember I walked in and I sang a song, something like, almost like being in love was, I think, the song. It's almost like. And I finished the song, and I'm looking on the audience, and the people who were casting it were the real deal. I mean, the writers, Jerome Ragney and Jerry Rado and Tom O'Horgan, the original director. And it was almost like that scene in The Producers where they're doing Springtime for Hitler, and the audience is like. Because I think they might have been somewhat impressed by the way I did the song, but they basically said, that was very good, Joe, but why don't you come back? We're going to have a call back like next week. Come back, but try to, funk it up a little bit. And that's when I realized that this show, the kind of Hair was kind of like, it was 1969. It was apropos of the 60s, and it was a little more of that. So I wound up the next week borrowing a friend of mine's poncho who was kind of like a hippie at the school, and I let my hair get a little scraggly and sang something more rock and roll. And bottom line, I wound up doing 6 different auditions. And then the very last one got down to out of the 6,000, now we're down to about 50. And it was at nighttime at the big theater downtown. And bottom line, out of that last 50, I was the very last one chosen, I remember. But one thing that might be apropos to an acting class is that along the way, along each stage of it, I think it was, I wound up falling back on and relying upon little things I had learned that at the time I thought were of useless information, some of it. Like, you take movement class, and so some of the movement stuff I've done, I thought, what the hell am I going to use this again? But then there would be part of the audition would be they want to see how you move and how you relate to improvs. And so we're constantly throughout these 6 auditions, we're being they want to see how well you can project. All of a sudden, these voice classes where we'd learn to project and this and that, all of a sudden come into play because you have to hit the back row and all that kind of stuff. So by the time I was cast in the show, I mean, I think and ultimately I wound up doing it for about a year and a half. And I saw other members of the cast, some of them fall along the wayside, who were originally cast because they had tremendous talent, but couldn't sustain doing 8 performances a week, week in, week out, month in, month out. And that's what's kind of separated the people who were taking it pretty seriously in terms of being a career, and others that had a lot of talent but just maybe weren't geared to do like a Broadway show, which takes just a unique kind of skill set. But that was my first, and so in a way, my first job was a pretty big job.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily go up from there. I mean, after Hair, I kind of came back down to here for about 12, 13 years, before I made another definitive leap. but that's the way careers can go.
And on that same topic of timing and having to work these excruciating hours, you spent so much of your career doing feature films where in 60 to 90 days of principal photography, you're done, maybe a little ADR. But when it comes to television, that's a whole different ball of wax. How have you been able to maneuver from feature film acting into television acting and still be able to keep your sanity?
Well, I mean, I think it's actually not a difficult transition in a way, because the experience I'd gotten from doing the feature film acting I'd primarily done, it gives you the familiarity of working with a camera. There really is no difference. If people try to tell you that there's a difference between working on film or working on television, it's not true. There is none. They say action and they say cut. You don't act differently. I don't go in and say, oh, I'm doing a movie now, I better do my movie acting, or I'm doing a TV show and I better do my series TV acting. It's all the same. I mean,
right.
And I've certainly done movies. I've done a variety of movies that have budgeted less than one episode of Criminal Minds. So ultimately you fill the space you're given. I've been on movies that literally have Godfather probably was about a 9-month ordeal. Baby's Day Out was about 6 months. I've done a couple of Woody Allen films that were very long, maybe 6-7 months. On the other hand, I've done feature films that we've shot in 4 weeks, So the pace changes, and like the page count that you're going to do per day and stuff. But in terms of what you're doing as an actor, it's really no different. And I actually kind of like the pace we do on television because, again, the familiarity I gained from working in films of understanding the process, how it works, we have a saying. I mean, you may have heard it. There's a joke saying, especially in the film business, I work for free. They pay me to wait. Because for every minute of film you shoot, you're spending 59 minutes out of that hour sitting in a trailer waiting for it to set the lights, set the camera, this, that. So it's not the same, especially if you're from the theater as I am, where it's immediate. You get on stage, the play starts and you go till the end. Film and television acting is constant, stopping, starting, shooting out of sequence, doing this, that, and the other. So it's a whole different form of acting. But the pace of it doesn't bother me. I mean, I actually prefer to do a decent pace. I'll shoot 5-6 pages a day. To me is not excessive, as long as everybody is professional, knows what they're doing, comes in prepared. And I think that's almost a more natural way of working. And I think back in the old days, in the glory days of Hollywood. I mean, ironically, you're here in the Warner Brothers, facilities where they made some great movies. They would shoot. An actor would shoot 6-7 movies a year when they were part of the studio system. Yeah. So you got used to working at a good pace. I think it happened over the years that the budgets got bigger, and so they almost have to justify it. Oh, the picture's $100 million. We can't shoot it in 4 weeks. We better take 2 years to do this. So they're going to wonder what the hell, you could have done it so much quicker. You didn't need all that money. So, but it's something you have to learn from experience. Right. I mean, I don't know if there's any. It's hard to teach that kind of stuff, but the more you do, the more you learn, the more you understand.
So who has questions?
First question is, when breaking down a script, like when you first get it, is there a specific order to what you look for, and what are, in your, mind, what are the most important things that you look for initially?
The most important thing is if you like it. I mean, obviously, if you read the script, I remember, like you showed a few clips from Searching for Bobby Fischer, which I don't know whether you've seen the movie or not. It's really, I think it's one of the most brilliant screenplays ever written, and it was written by Steve Zalian. It was his first. It wasn't the first thing he's written. It was the first thing he directed. Because I remember on one of our last days of shooting, I see him scribbling in a corner on something, during the breaks. I said, "Steve, what are you doing?" He goes, I have to finish these rewrites for my next script. I'm being rushed. I go, "What's it called?" He goes, "It's called Schindler's List." And I thought it was a story about a guy that goes to a grocery store and had like a list. I mean, I didn't know. I thought it was some abstract movie. I said, "So, Steve, what was it? Was it a guy goes to a grocery store, his wife, He says, No. Steven Spielberg, Holocaust, But anyway, but when I read that script, I remember when I got that script sent to me that they were interested in me to play the father. I read the script, and it's just like when you read a good book or anything. By the end of the script, I was like, I'd gotten emotional. There was moments I'd laughed at myself. There were moments I teared up, and I thought to myself, Jesus Christ, is this? I hope that. I remember calling my agent instantly, saying, "Did you read this?" He goes, "Yeah." I says, "Am I kidding myself? Is this as good as I think it is?" And he said, "Yeah, I think so too." And then I remember I ran into Ben Kingsley. We had both done the film Bugsy prior to that, so I knew Ben already. And I guess I had heard you, in fact, spoke to you all. And I saw Ben at, it was a party we had for Bugsy premiere, or I guess because we got nominated for Best Picture that year. And I'd heard that Ben was going to do the other part. And it was the same thing. We looked at each other and said, "Hey, Ben, we're going to be working together again." He goes, "Yes." He goes, "Oh, Joe, yes." And it's one of the most marvelous scripts I've ever read in my career. I'm thinking, thank God, all right, Ben thinks so, then I'm not crazy. So a lot of times, just trust your guts. If it reads good and you love it, that's it. I mean, I'm in, and that's the main thing. Then beyond that, of course, now the character, who you're playing, and if it resonates with you, you just then, you start to think, all right, how do I see this guy? Now, some roles demand more research than others, I feel. Especially when you're playing a real character. Now, in terms of Searching for Bobby Fischer, that is a real person. That was a real family. It's a true story. But I didn't necessarily, and we covered somewhat the way, I don't resemble the real father or anything like that. He was a sports writer. We kept the truth, in many aspects. But it wasn't necessary that I had to look like him or sound like him, because who really knows what, Josh Waitskin's dad looks like or cares? It doesn't matter. However, when I played Dean Martin in The Rat Pack, that was important. When I played Fidel Castro in a film called My Little Assassin, that was important. So in other words, the amount of research you do is dependent on how the public perceives that character you're playing. Everybody in the world thinks they know who Dean Martin is. So I had to really do a lot of homework to try to get in that same ballpark, because within the first 10 minutes, you got to kind of convince them, look, I'm not Dean Martin, but maybe I can pretend to play this guy for a couple hours. And they'll buy it if you do a decent job. If it's a different role, a role that's you're totally creating, totally fictional role, then it's a little more wide open. And you start to draw on things that you just feel are right. I'm also more of an actor. See, I don't know what kind of things or techniques you may hear about in terms of acting. There's different obvious techniques. There's a million different schools of thought. I more work in a way like the British, in a way that seem to work more in externals. That I work from the outside in the sense that I probably get as much from deciding what my character looks like and sounds like than I do from, oh, what's he thinking? And you know what I mean? I'm not a method actor in that way. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not my thing. But however, if I see a pair of shoes, and a certain hat or something, I might bring a lot of, it'll trigger thoughts in me to build a character that way. Just by seeing I've done it in a variety of times in roles where I go to the costumer and I look at all their ideas, then I'll see a pair of shoes and say, those are the shoes this guy would wear. And that helps me kind of think of who this person is. Now that's kind of haircut he'd have, or that's kind of jewelry he'd wear, or, even like in that little thing in Money Pit, the fact that, I purposely used the comb and brushed my mustache because I thought this is the guy that would use that. He would comb his own mustache, a little thing, and then pick his nails with the same comb, things like that. So you're just constantly looking for little things within the script, as long as you, like I said, first of all, that you like it, and then you start, adding little layers from wherever you get them. But early in your career, one point I should make is you don't worry as much about how much you like it as you do later in your career when you've kind of established yourself. Because I know it sounds easy to say, but the truth is it's harder to keep a career than it is to get a career. In other words, you can get there. You can get that break that gets you there. And that's a job. And you might do a great work with that job. But what are you going to do the next year and the next year and 10 years from now? I mean, this is my 42nd year professionally doing this. So, I have to think of it in long terms. And so that's what's important. So early in your career, it's hard to make a mistake. In other words, if someone offers you something and it's not going to embarrass you and it's not going to be some, wild, well, nowadays, who knows, porno films seem to be, have made careers, which, escapes me. But my point being is, as long as you could, just doing stuff is good. I mean, it's okay for the experience. You do it and hope for the best. And if it works out, fine. If it doesn't, it's not going to kill you. It's almost later on when you're getting a lot of offers and things, and you have to make a decision. Do I do this or I do that? Then it almost becomes, that's the difference between someone who can make a career and someone who might just blow it all in, by making a bad choice. So, I hope that somewhat answers your question about what to look for, but there's no, I don't get too technical about it. In other words, if you really like it and you say to yourself, I think I could play this guy, and this is the way I see it, you work with the director, you talk to them, and especially in film, a director has a lot of control, a lot of power, and so that you kind of want to be on the same page, because otherwise he may cut you out anyway,
Hello, Mr. Mantegna.
Yeah.
For an actor that's assuming that you're part of the union SAG, what's the best piece of advice that you can give to make a long, prosperous career acting in feature films and television, as far as picking the right agent, how to communicate with that agent, how important are headshots, all the above?
Yeah. I would say this. All of that, I get a similar question like that a lot, and I understand it too. But honest to God, I would say it's secondary. In other words, that is not, often I find young actors or starting out actors that becomes a big concern of theirs, and I get it. I mean, it's easy for me to say. I've been in SAG so long. I mean, I feel like they want to name the joint after me, but I know what it was like that first day when you get it. And you go, well, I have a card. I'm an actor now. But it's not really true. I mean, it's that's putting the cart in front of the horse. Bottom line, those are. Even agents, all that. I came from Chicago where we didn't even have agents. So for the first 10 years I was acting, I didn't even have an agent. You just kind of heard about auditions and you did them and you got them. My point being this, that stuff will take care of itself if you've got the juice, if you've got the talent, if you've got, what it takes to work in this business. What you should concentrate on is put yourself in a position that you're doing the work. And by that, I don't care if it's doing a waiver play or doing student films or doing, whatever you need to do. Anybody who thinks that the minute they get their SAG card, that's it, it's like, great, okay, where do I pick up my check? When do I get my next movie I star in because I'm in the union? You're sadly mistaken. I mean, it's no coincidence that something like 95% of the members of the Screen Actors Guild probably make less than, $10,000 a year. I mean, it's an incredible inequity, but that's just the way it is. There are people in SAG that have done one job in their entire life, and I bet there's more of them in the union than those that have worked, consistently. So while it's important in the sense that, yeah, you'll need to do that, but at the end of the day, and you know where you'd learn a lot if you cast something yourself. Like if you're a director and you have a casting session, and you just, let's say you put out a casting call, say, I'm looking for 100. And just, make it general, 100 women that are of this age and, and then 100 men of this age or whatever it may be, and you have them all come in. Now, if they come in and you have a prepared, let's say, speech for them to do at your audition, and you're the director, somebody comes in, they hand you a resume that's this long, and it says, yes, I've been in a reunion since I was born. They gave it to me when I was turned 1 because they used me in a little commercial as a baby. And I've been in everything and anything and done all this work. And the thing is this long, and you go, okay, great. Then the other person comes in and says, well, you know what? I really haven't done, I'm not in a union. I've done a lot of little things, community things and stuff like that. But, that's it. Here's my resume. I put on an index card. They both read for you. The man or the woman who is auditioning has their resume and the index card, knocks your socks off, kills you, basically does the performance where you say to yourself as the director, I should have shot it. That's the person. Or the other person comes in and they may be very talented or whatever, but it's like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. So I don't care if their resume went from here to the back wall. The guy with the index card's getting in. I don't ask, oh, are you in the union? Oh, you're not? Well, then you must not be very good. I'm going to hire you. No, you don't do that. Because who cares? If a person hires you, they don't care if you're in the union or not. They'll get you in the union. I mean, once you sign that contract, you're eligible to join the union. What they want to know is, can you do the work? Can you do the job? And the same thing about agents. There's no magic agent. I mean, there's no agent in the world that will get you a job. Agents get you in the door, get you in the thing to put you in front of people to see you. And I understand that too is important. But if you're putting it out there, I got my first agent by doing a waiver play in Century City, because it ran for a long time. It was a play called Bleacher Bums that I also conceived and, was co-authored many years ago. The play, luckily enough, was a big success, so the show ran for a long time. But, that first, I did it for almost a year at this little theater on Pico. Different agents would come see it, and that, an agent sees you on the play and goes, wow, that person's got, hey, I'll represent you. I'll send you out. Then it's on you. But no agent in the world gets you a job. No union card gets you a job. So I have no advice as to about that, specifically about that. That will happen. The trick is, just like being a carpenter. If you don't know nothing about hammers and nails and can't build shit, having a union card saying that you're a union carpenter does, if they go, oh, he's a union carpenter, and all of a sudden you start building something and it's like, it falls apart instantly. You go, hey, what? Where another guy walks in and builds you the most beautiful bookcase in the world in like half an hour, perfect. You don't ask, wow. Oh, by the way, are you in the union? Most likely they are, but what I'm, you get my point, I think. So don't worry about that. Don't worry about it. Put yourself in a position where they can see what you do, not who represents you. I never had a manager. I shouldn't say never. I had a manager for 10 minutes 30 years ago. Never had a publicist. My feeling is, and I'm not saying they're bad, but just for me, I didn't want to make that many phone calls. I just wanted one person I talked to, and that's it. Because I figure everybody I work for, they have a publicist anyway. What do I need to hamper myself with that? So don't worry about the externals. Worry about your talent, what you're doing. And if you got it, it'll get noticed. Eventually, someone will see you. You got to keep putting it out there, though. Don't sit by the phone. But some of these people think they get a great agent. They think, well, this is great. I'll be at home. I'm sitting by the phone. Call me. When the job's there. It's not the way it works. It's never has, never will.
Thanks, Mr. Mantegna.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
I still didn't phrase this question completely in my head because it's a bit longer.
Okay.
Okay, so probably as everybody else in this room, I share the same dream of doing this job, being in this business, but right now I'm sort of confused in a transition, don't know whether to continue on or just to go home where I came from. So when you said that after hair, you had like sort of... you went down in your career for 12 or 13 years. Mm-hmm. I was wondering what made you, and obviously you did the right decision, what made you do this decision? What made you stay in this and not say, okay, enough is enough, I'm going to do something else?
Well, because I'll put it this way. When I say went down, I only mean in terms of the externals. I didn't make as much money as I did in hair for probably the next 10, 15 years. Because I started off pretty high. All of a sudden I was in this big hit musical, and I became one of the leads quickly. After being cast, I became an understudy, then the lead, and did that for the most of the time. Then after that, I did other musicals. I did Godspell. I did, and then I started. I worked with a theater company out of Chicago for 5 years called the Organic Theater Company. Now we made bupkis. We didn't make much money at all because it was a little community, not a community theater, but our own little theater company. Like they have many of them here in Los Angeles. You all know who they are, and the same thing in Chicago and other cities. But like Steppenwolf was one of those little theater companies back then when I was working with the Organic. But it was invaluable in terms of the experience I got. It was like being in the minor leagues of a sports team. This is where I really learned to act, or really learned to work with other actors and try things and experiment and use my imagination, and all those things came into play. So I never felt, even though I wasn't working at the level I was when I did hair in terms of being on Broadway, making a really good living, what I was doing for the next 10, 12 years, I didn't enjoy it any less. In fact, I probably enjoyed it more. I just wasn't as successful at it. But it was great. And that's the key. Long as if you're not enjoying what you're doing now, let's say, as much as you were when you did plays and stuff in high school or whatever you did, or when you first got the bug, whether it was making films as a director, I don't know what you all are studying specifically and what your interests are. But if you're not having as much fun doing it now at the level you're doing it, you may not have a place in this business. Because if you think in your mind, oh, it'll get better when I'm successful. I'm struggling now. I hate it now. This is all bullshit now, but that's okay. As soon as I make it big, then I'll be happy and content and it'll all be great. No, it doesn't work that way. You'll be the most bitter waiter and waitress in Hollywood. That's all you will be, because you'll say, Jesus Christ, I've been doing this for 30 fucking years and I should be somebody now. Not necessarily. But if you enjoy what you're doing, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? I'm not having any more fun doing it, what I do today at the level I'm doing it today, than I did when I did it in high school. I get paid a lot more money. I have some fame, some notoriety, whatever has gone with it over the last 40 years. But I don't like it one iota more. I like it in fact, probably my fondest memories are of stuff from high school, junior college, working at the Organic Theater. We used to tour Europe we get paid $100 a week, and we're playing every little theater all over Europe. You know, those are the things you remember. Just like if you I swear, you ask athletes, probably ask Kobe Bryant, who was your favorite moments at playing basketball? My guess is he'll talk about, when he did it in high school or when he did it, with his friends. You're doing it at a professional level now, but that's not where the enjoyment comes. So to answer your question, like you say, I don't know whether I want to stay or I want to go, you know what I mean? Your heart will tell you that.
Oh, I love it.
Well, okay, but if you love it enough to stay, regardless of where you are with it, then maybe you got a shot. But if the other side becomes more overpowering and you just say, you know what, I've had it, I'm done, I don't want to struggle anymore, I want to go there's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that. Not everybody in this room may become what they hope and dream and wish to become, but it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, just this Friday, I was fortunate enough, this 2 days, whatever today's, Tuesday, Friday, I got a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And in my speech, I basically dedicated it to half of it was to the dreamers. And in a nutshell, what I said was to all those people that are going to put in the time, put into work hard, have made a career, but for whatever reason are not going to get maybe a star in Hollywood for whatever it's worth. Doesn't matter. You know what I mean? You're dreaming the same dream I dreamed. I just got, for me it all kind of worked out. And so this is happening. But for everybody else, just know that you share this one with me, because you have my respect, because you love, like you say, you love it. And that's what's important. You have to love it. You have to embrace it. You have to walk out. So I walk out with the same smile on my face after having done like a play in Chicago 35 years ago where I got paid, 50 cents as I do when I, won a Tony Award, or when I, do a movie like Godfather or something like that. It's a different level of fame, but the love of it and the passion for it has to be just as strong, regardless of that. And then if you can say that to yourself, then you're all right. Then you got a shot, and keep going. Because you're already ahead of most of the people in the world who are doing something that they hate. Most people wish they even had a desire to be in this business because it's a fantasy. It is. It's a fantasy world. We're playing pretend. Who doesn't want to be a movie star, TV star? Everybody says, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a TV star. I want to be a movie star, But actually, you know what? Some people do. And of course you would aspire to that. And if you love it, great. You're already ahead of you're not, somebody who's maybe stamping fenders for Ford Motor and hates every minute of it,
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
You've had such a diverse body of work in comedy and drama over the last many years. My question concerns Criminal Minds, my favorite show. Seen every episode twice.
Good, me too.
How do you keep a sense of humor on that set, and how do you let it go at the end of the day? The writing is amazing, but it's so dark.
Yeah, it's so dark. Okay, that's a good question, and I'll tell you this. You will find out that there is an inverse formula about stuff like that. By that I mean, I have found it to be true that usually the darker and more morbid and weird the material is of something you work on, the inverse is true of how you're behaving during all the rest of the time you're working on it. In other words, when you watch that show, like I say, you're watching 44 minutes of footage that we shot over 8 days. It takes us 8 days to make an episode. So in those 8 days to make those 44 minutes, at the times they say action, yeah, it's all, serious business. And we're dealing with some very graphic, sometimes gory, sometimes intense things, which are all, to me, it's a testament why the show's successful, though, because it's true. In other words, this stuff does happen. There is a unit of the FBI called the Behavior Analysis Unit. I've been to Quantico twice in Washington. I see what these real people do. And I have such tremendous respect for them because when I do it, it's pretend. When they say cut, I can pick up a fake arm and throw it at another actor. The real people can't do that, obviously. So I have tremendous respect for them, and that's why it doesn't bother me. So if anything, we have that ability to just kind of like, our set is, even Thomas Gibson, Hotchner is actually, he's a jokester. I mean, he's not like that all the time. None of us are.
Darman Gregg. Yeah, he's funny.
Yeah, exactly. So we're acting. I mean, that's what that is. But you know what? I talk to the real guys, and I've done a lot of roles like where I've played homicide detectives and people in that line of work before. And I find that even they, in real life, they have to find those moments of levity and stuff. And I try to even bring it to my character of David Rossi. I purposely told the writers, I said, if anybody should be like a little not politically correct, let's make it David Rossi. Because he's older, he's been around, he understands that he'll make a morbid joke about it. Because the real guys do that too. Because otherwise you go crazy. If all you're dealing with is death and destruction and abuse and incest and all these different crazy things that happen, you have to somehow just step back and almost laugh at it once in a while. You know what I mean? And that happens in real life. So it's just no different on the show. But no, our show, it's what you see on the show is not reflective of how we behave as a kid. And that's true across the board. I think of almost any show, you'll find out. It's got nothing to do with the subject matter you're doing. And if it does, then I think that group maybe is into method a little too much.
Glad to hear it.
If you're like, you go, oh yeah, in order to be a murderer, I better go kill somebody. No,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, round two. So my class, the class I'm a part of, is finishing our first year at this school in an acting program, and we're about to do a presentation. I think a lot of us like to see it as a showcase. What do you think the odds are that they would come to such like a small and like kind of production to come see our the talent that we have to show?
Well, that's a hard question for me to answer. I mean, I don't know. But again, like I said, you have two choices. You're either doing this thing and you're putting this out there and you're performing for whoever shows up to see it, or you're not. So at least of those two choices, doing it is better than not. Because certainly no agent is going to, or casting director or anybody is going to all of a sudden just randomly walk down your block and knock on a door. Say, does any actors live here? Oh, yeah, I am. Oh, great. Well, come on. I'm looking for one. That doesn't happen. So you do have to put it out there. But all I could say is the actors and and when I say actor, I mean it. It's just easier than saying actor and actresses all the time. It's the same person, men or women. They have to come from somewhere. You know what I mean? In other words, it's not like we have a finite set of actors and then when they all die, that's it. The movies and TV and plays are done. All the actors are dead. Obviously, every day somebody's doing something that's the new person on the block, and it's not based on age. It's not all of a sudden that the youngest start coming up. All of a sudden, somebody like Gene Hackman then start acting when he was like 40. They come from wherever they come from, and however they come. But that's what I meant about putting yourself in a position that at least you're giving yourself a shot. I don't know if there's any guarantees. And even if you had that guarantee, who's to say? All of a sudden you're saying, oh, wow, have you heard every agent in this town coming to see this thing, and every casting agent is coming down. And who knows, for whatever reason they may come, and it may be a particular thing you're doing or not looking for that or whatever. You can't worry about that. The thing is, you just got to put it out there. Do the best work you can. And that's why you can't get discouraged if you go out to one audition, you don't get it, 10 auditions, you don't get it, 50 auditions, you don't get it. Most of the time, unless you're really kidding yourself, it's not based on your talent. It's just based on you just weren't right for that particular thing. But you will be. If you keep your odds improve, the more you're doing what you're doing. And then as soon as you do one thing, it helps lead to another. Sometimes the littlest thing you do, let's say you do a student film for a friend of yours who's going to film school, and he's a freshman at film school, and says, would you, Spielberg used to do that. He hired people to be in his films when he was a freshman. Needless to say, I have a great, strong association with David Mamet, who I would assume most of you know who he is. I mean, I worked with David Mamet in the early 70s. He was nobody. He was peddling his plays around Chicago, trying to get anybody to do his plays. And I was just one of those actors like, yeah, sure, I'll do your play, you know. We got to become dear friends. Got to the point, he was one of the men who spoke on my behalf on Friday at that ceremony. He's one of the world's greatest acclaimed writers. You know, how lucky am I that, you know, he and I collided, you know, 30 plus years ago. But I didn't orchestrate that. There was no like, oh, we're going to put you, here's this guy who's going to be real famous someday. And, you know, we're going to put you guys together. It just happens. So you put it out there. And that's all you can say. There's no guarantees. There's no, but all I can say, I could also say if the good agents, the good casting directors, like our casting people, I know they go and look at stuff. And I know that they have cast people based on that. They'll go to these things, kinds of things, or they'll, you know, and I know there's all different kinds of them, and I couldn't tell you what specific ones, you know, they are or whatever. But a good casting director, and I mean, and I've obviously known some great ones in my time. They're smart. They know that talent is out there, but they've got to find it. And when they see it, they respond. They see somebody they like, they go, yeah, hey, wow, and they'll put them in something. So, you know, that's all you can do. Just put it out there, you know, because if you don't, then you're just lost. You know, you're just a wannabe. You're just out there saying, why can't somebody discover me? Well, you got to be in a position you got to be visible to be discovered.
Hey, Joe. Quick question for you. I was actually really curious, over the course of your career, obviously you've done a lot of projects. What, in your own opinion, in your heart, has been the most rewarding to you, and why?
Well, I don't know if I could point to one project that was most rewarding to me. I mean, some things made a seminal difference in my life and my career. I mean, in 1984, 83, when I got the phone call from my then dear friend David Mamet, who I'd worked with for many years, I got the phone call saying, hey, I'm doing this play in Chicago, and if it goes well, we're going to take it to Broadway. I'd like you to play this part. You know, it was the play Glengarry Glen Ross. And, you know, he offers me this part of Ricky Roma. Okay. I was out here about that. I'd already moved out here, my wife and I'd been banging around, and I was doing I did like 3-line guest shots on, you know, on Soap or Archie Bunker's Place and stuff like that. But I was okay. I was doing little plays and stuff, doing what I did. Next thing I know, I'm doing a play in Chicago with my friend David. I'm doing this part. Next thing I know, we're on Broadway. Next thing I know, I win a Tony Award. The next thing I know, the show wins the Pulitzer Prize. And this is 14 years into my career. So I remember being interviewed at that time, and somebody said, one journalist says, wow, what's it like being a Pulitzer Prize winning play and winning a Tony Award? I said, you know what it's like? It's like winning the lottery, but I bought a lot of tickets. So that's obviously I'll always remember that kind of fondly, because from that point on, my career made a definitive leap. It kind of went from like here, up to like, boom, now I'm here, you know. And that's what I meant about all along this way. I had just as much fun. It was great. In fact, it didn't matter what I did or who I did it with or how it turned out, you know. It was like, okay, once you get to this level, it gets a little trickier. Because here where you don't know when you're going to work again. Every time you get a job, you know, it finishes on Tuesday and you're like you think you're back to zero. And maybe you don't work again for another, you know, month, 6 months, a year, who knows? That's why it's important to make your own fun too. If you got friends, if you want to make a movie, make it. You know, especially nowadays, it's easier for you guys. Back then, you know, we wanted to make a movie, we'd have to go steal a camera. I mean, you know, a camera. I mean, you know, or something. Now you can do it with your goddamn phone. You can make a movie, it seems like. So, you know, if you think you can make a movie, make it. You want to do a play, do it. Put it on. You know, do that for yourself. Because that can make a difference, and it has. There's time and again you'll see about people. You know, Robert Rodriguez, when he made that film, and all of a sudden, you know, became his director, or even Spielberg. You know, guys like that who did these little films and all of a sudden worked their way up to who they became. But for me, that was a definitive thing. Beyond that, that was the one thing at least I could point to where I made a significant jump. But it's not like it doesn't come in increments. My feeling is you're either working as a, I don't mean this in like a derogatory way, but you're either doing it as an amateur or you're doing it as a professional. And that's not bad to be doing it as an amateur. Because like I said, I did it as an amateur basically for many, many years. But if you get the shot at the big time, if all of a sudden now you're working with directors like Francis Coppola, Barry Levinson, who actually played that. If you recognized him, he was playing the guy in that Bugsy bit, talking to Bugsy Siegel as the stage manager. That was, or the first AD, that was Barry Levinson. Woody Allen. I've worked with the greatest directors, the greatest actors, and I feel very fortunate. But I don't aspire to anything. In other words, people say, "Where do you want to go with your career? What haven't you done that you want to do?" Nothing. I'm doing it. I'm working in the major leagues. I'm working with the best people. As to what I wind up doing, I don't know what's next. If Criminal Minds is the end of it, if I wind up doing this for the next 15 years and I'm in a wheelchair playing David Ross, maybe I'm that, but maybe that's where it ends. Maybe not. I like to think that'll end and I'll do something else and whatever. But it's all been good. But you're either doing it at a level where you're kind of doing it to get to the majors, where you're working at a level where you're working with all the people you ever wanted to work with. And I wish that on all of you. And that may happen, and it may not happen, but it doesn't matter. There are a lot of people who have made a pretty good living and had a wonderful life just being in the business at whatever level they wound up doing it at. And that's where it's important. You got to have contentment. You have to don't be bitter about it. Don't be that bitter actor that's still living in his little apartment and saying, "Shit, I threw my life away because I did this for 40 years and still never got anywhere." But if you can do it for 40 years and still say to yourself, "You know what? I've had a great ride. I've enjoyed it." Then it doesn't matter if you're the biggest star in Hollywood or if you're just still doing, waiver plays on Melrose Avenue. What's the difference?
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Carlos Corotana here. Godfather, how was it for you? Two-part question. And theatre or films, and London or New York?
Theatre, films, London, and New York in terms of my like or dislike or my...
For theatre? Like, have you worked in London and...
Yeah, okay. And what my take on both? Okay.
Sure.
Well, just quickly then, for The Godfather was... as my friend put it, a dear friend of mine, Vinny, said when I got cast in Godfather, he says, "Oh man, you're in the Italian Star Wars," which is kind of what it was like. I mean, because the first two Godfather movies were, at the time we started, the third one was like, oh my God, they were considered two of the greatest movies, and they should be of all time. So it was pretty intimidating to all of a sudden be cast in that film. And I remember when we shot most of it in Italy. And I remember my first day there, I went there in the soundstage, and when I opened up the door to go to a rehearsal, first day of rehearsal, and they were rehearsing a party scene that happens at the beginning of the movie. As I pushed open this huge door on the soundstage at Cinecittà, which is where Fellini shot all his movies and all the history of this studio, I pushed the door open, and so now I break through the soundproofing, so now you can hear what's going on in the studio. As a soundstage, as I push the door open, I can hear the band's rehearsing for the party scene, and they're playing da 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 da, the theme song from the movie, and I'm like, it's like, oh, because I'd been hearing this music for like 18 years at parties and stuff, and I'm thinking, this is the real deal. Yeah. This is actually the movie. This is an orchestra rehearsing for a scene I'm going to shoot that I'm going to be in, and it was like, oh. I got a little shiver up my spine, And then I remember when I did that, the scene you saw, when I walked around the table. I remember when I walked in for that day, and I looked around the room, and it was this incredible sound stage they built, and the whole thing was built on a rotating platform, because later in the scene when Joey Zaza doesn't take it so well that he gets kicked out, so when I leave, I basically kill everybody in the room almost, and so they built that whole room on a almost like on springs, so that the whole room shook. And so glasses would, it was an incredible set. It was all built on this, on springs. But that first day when I walked in on that set, I looked around, I'm looking, here's Coppola over here, giving some directions. I look over here, here's Al, And I'm thinking, holy Christ, I'm about to do this scene. Godfather, and I got to yell at Al Pacino. So for 2 seconds, I had this moment of like, and then my third second, it was like, fuck this. This is what I do. This is what I came here for.
Yeah.
It's that whole thing is like you be like being in Little League baseball, and you work your way up, and now you're in high school, and then you're in college, and now minors. Next thing you know, you're in Yankee Stadium, and you're facing Roger Clemens. For one second, you get nervous, but on the other hand, you go, well, wait a minute, isn't this what you wanted? As soon as I thought that, I went, okay, let's go, bring it on. I'm here, and it's great. It was a good feeling. Now you talk about theater versus film. Let me quickly tell you the biggest difference between theater and film, and it applies to television as well. Put film/television, same thing. And you'll notice this if you've done both. It's a huge difference in terms of the dynamics. In terms of how you act, I can't in less than months, and even then, try to explain the nuances or whatever it is that makes it different in terms of how you act. You just pick that up. But I found the biggest difference is this. First of all, how many of you have been in a play? So many of you know what it's like to be in a play. The biggest thing about working live on stage is, as you have found out, I'm sure, there's some continuity to it. You do it the whole thing all the time. When you're doing it, you're sucking energy from the audience. It kind of feeds you. And as you're doing the play, even when it's exhausting, it kind of builds you up. So at the end of the play, when the curtain call, good night, everybody, or what, nobody ever leaves the theater and goes home and goes to sleep. Everybody goes, hey, let's go for a drink. Let's go for, right? You do that. You go because you're energized. You have sucked out all this energy from the audience, from what you've done, because it's a logical process. You've done this play and you've gone through the whole process and ended, and the audience has been there with you and the applause. So you've been energized. You work in film and television, that audience is gone. Now it's a thing this big. It's a lens. And you're going in at any given hour of the day. There's no logic to it. The call might be 6 a.m., it might be midnight. You're not shooting it in order. You might be shooting the last scene first, or the first scene last, and anything in between. And rather than sucking energy out of the audience, this lens, in a way, is sucking the energy out of you. And you're putting this thing out there, and it's just going, because they keep interrupting it. Oh, cut, wait, let's do that again. Something fell here. Okay. So you're doing it bits and pieces, stops and starts. So at the end of the day, from a film set, you don't see actors, for most part, unless you're Shamar Moore, you don't see them all, hey, let's go out to eat, somebody who's, really has that kind of energy. You just are wasted. You kind of go home and you learn your lines for the next day and stuff, because it's sucked it out of you. And that's the biggest dynamic difference between working in film and TV versus theater. One is almost like feeds you, the other drains you. And that's a big difference. And there's no way to understand it unless you do both. But if you do, you'll find that out, And it's two very different disciplines. And you find that out. Now, in terms of London versus New York or London, I've worked in London. I've done films there and some theater there. It's great. It's a great city, great place, great culture. But at the end of the day, you don't play to an audience based on nationality or ethnicity or anything else. You do what you do. You put it out there, and then they're going to get what they get out of it. But I've had to, I've had the privilege to work internationally in a few mediums, and so it's been great.
Thank you.
Time for one more question.
Oh, I've already asked a bunch. After your turn. All right. So this is in regard to one of our teachers, Cliff Wiseman. He went to a play of Speed the Plow that you were in. I don't remember exactly when it was, but he said he distinctly remembers that in the middle of the play, while you guys were acting up on stage, some random guy walked up onto stage like a zombie toward Madonna as if he was going to get her.
Yeah.
And he wanted to know.
Wow, you
we
read
all
that
want to
one,
know.
huh? Was it you? No, Cliff. Who's Cliff?
Cliff Wiseman. He's a
Okay.
teacher at the school. Yeah.
Oh,
like, how
I
much
thought
do you
Chris.
remember that? And what was
I
going
remember
through your mind?
distinctly.
What was going through
yeah.
your mind when that happened?
Oh, I remember that. You don't forget that. Yeah, that was 1988. And I remember in the newspapers the next day, they said, Joe Mantegna saves Madonna's life. Not quite true. Yeah, I was doing the play Speed the Plow on Broadway. That was the first. It's funny. I feel like Lee J Cobb, which means everything I've done now has been revived already. So I feel like, oh my God, I'm like that guy. But this was the first original production of Speed the Plow, 1988. It was 3-character play with Ron Silver, myself, and Madonna. I think the one and only time she was on Broadway. But yeah, we're doing a scene, and I'm doing a scene with Madonna, and I'm talking to her, and I notice her her eyes dart toward the audience, like, because I was kind of like this, and so I'm not seeing the audience as well, and she's facing this way, and I see her eyes kind of go, and I'm thinking, oh, this is a weird little acting choice she's making on this particular line. But then as I turned my head, yeah, this young man had thought it might be a good idea to meet Madonna on stage in New York during the play. I don't know what his intentions were. I really don't think he was out to kill her or hurt her. I mean, I don't know. But it's funny, the things that you can't anticipate how you're going to behave in situations like that. But what was funny is when I saw him, now I turned my head and I see this guy jumping up onto the stage and coming toward her. Honest to God, the first thought that went through my head was, what the fuck? It took me, 20 years to get to Broadway, and this is a 3-character play, and you ain't in it, pal. And if you think, you're going to be part of the action here, you are sorely mistaken. So I was like offended. That was my reaction. I was like, who the hell do you think you are? And so as he got about halfway to her, I came to him, I grabbed him by the arm, I looked at him, and I think he sensed that there's nowhere to go but where I'm going to take you. And so I started taking him this way, and I look in the wings, and now this New York Stagehands, who are a burly group of boys anyway, and I had that look on their face like, oh my God, we let this happen, They were like embarrassed and kind of angry. So, and on top of it, Madonna had a bodyguard out in the audience, but the guy had watched him. I think the guy for 2 seconds must have looked the other way when he ran up. So he felt bad too. So I saw him coming running down the aisle. So I just went over and I just threw the guy into the wings. And I came back out, and Madonna had the next line, and I remember she was just like, There was that moment of and I'm not even sure if the audience really knew what was going on, but we got through it. I think Ron Silverden, who was on the way on the other end of the stage, threw out a line. And in fact, he yelled. I remember him yelling something like, "Is this another one of your tricks?" He says, to kind of like change the mood of it. No, but these things happen. It's live theater. Anything can happen. So it was not. No, I didn't say. Contrary to the New York Post or whatever it was, I didn't save her life, but it was a memorable moment in theater for me. I think Madonna will remember it as well. I wound up doing a movie with her a few years later, so it's all good. Maybe she was grateful. So yeah, sure, put Joe in a movie. He saved my life.
Well, we do actually have a surprise presentation for you.
Oh,
yes.
Well, maybe that kid was going to come out of the audience again.
Now, this is not from Meucci, and this is not a little pin from the Pope. But what this is an honorary master's degree.
Oh my goodness!
In acting from the New York Film Academy.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Mantegna.